March 4th, 1946 was an ordinary Tuesday for most people in Harlem, but for Marcus Riley, it was the day his life and the lives of many around him would hang in the balance. For 3 years, Riley had been Bumpy Johnson's driver, his personal aide, and in many ways, his shadow. He had seen everything that happened in Bumpy's office, on the streets, and in the back rooms where deals were made and secrets traded. He knew the rhythms of Bumpy's world, the patterns of his schedule, and the people who walked through the doors of Harlem's most infamous office. He was invisible in plain sight, the kind of trusted man who could be counted on to carry messages, keep secrets, and never ask questions. That trust, which had made him invaluable to Bumpy, was now going to be used against him. What Riley carried into that office was small, almost unnoticeable, a hidden FBI wire sewn into his jacket, a device that would, in theory, capture every word Bumpy spoke about his operations. The FBI had promised him $75,000 for this single act of betrayal, money that, for Riley, might age. Seemed like a ticket out of the street-level life he had known for so long. He imagined himself walking away, rich and unscathed, the hero of a secret story he would never tell. But even as he straightened his jacket, checking the wire under the harsh fluorescent lights of Bumpy's office building, Riley didn't realize that he had stepped into a trap far more sophisticated than any he could have. He imagined. Bumpy Johnson was no ordinary mobster. He wasn't simply a man who relied on muscle, intimidation, or fear to control his empire. He was a strategist, a master of human behavior, and above all, a man who understood that knowledge was power. Every word spoken in his presence, every gesture made by his associates, and every eye that watched the streets of Harlem contributed to a vast, invisible network of information. Before Riley even left the FBI building that morning, Bumpy already knew about the wire, the money, and the operation waiting to unfold. How, exactly, he had learned these details might never be known with certainty. Some said he had spies embedded within the federal agencies themselves. Others claimed that his street network was so finely tuned that no movement went unnoticed. What mattered was that by the time Riley parked the car and stepped into the office, Bumpy had him completely figured out. Riley's nerves were taut as he followed the familiar path into the office, expecting to be casual, confident, and in control. He had rehearsed the scenario countless times in his mind. He would sit, make small talk, and then carefully guide the conversation toward the topics the FBI wanted: drug routes, distribution schedules, names of key associates. It seemed simple enough. He trusted that the wire would do the work, that his voice and Bumpy's responses would be the key to a quick, clean operation. But trust is a dangerous thing when dealing with a man like Bumpy Johnson. As Riley entered, Bumpy looked up from his desk, his eyes sharp, assessing, calculating. He greeted Riley with the same casual warmth he always did, a smile that masked the razor-sharp intellect behind it. There was no hint in his demeanor that he suspected betrayal, yet everything about the room, the way the papers were arranged, the subtle shift of his chair, the deliberate pause before answering questions, was a silent signal. Bumpy was aware, he always was. Marcus Riley, with all his FBI training and promises of wealth, was walking into a situation he could never control. For Riley, those first moments were tense, but outwardly calm. He felt a mix of anticipation, greed, and guilt twisting together in his stomach. The wire beneath his jacket seemed heavier than it should, a constant reminder of the act he was about to commit. Each step closer to the desk felt like walking across a tightrope stretched over a pit of fire. Yet Bumpy treated him as he always did, like a loyal employee, someone invisible, someone who belonged. It was a calculated choice on Bumpy's part. By not immediately confronting Riley, by allowing him to act on his mission, Bumpy demonstrated his mastery of patience and psychological manipulation. He knew that revealing the knowledge of betrayal too early would remove all advantage. Letting the informant believe he was in control would lead him to make mistakes that would seal his own fate. Riley sat down, trying to steady his hands. He began to ask carefully constructed questions, prompting Bumpy to speak about the operations the FBI was so desperate to learn. For a few minutes, it seemed as if everything was going according to plan. Just E-words flowed. The wire hummed silently beneath his jacket, and Riley imagined the headlines of success that would follow. Yet beneath that surface, Bumpy's mind was working at a pace and depth Riley could never match. Every response, every hesitation, every nod was deliberate. He fed information in such a way that it appeared genuine, but ultimately controlled the narrative, leaving Riley thinking. She was the one in command of the operation. The tension in the room was almost tangible, an invisible tug-of-war of intellect and trust. Marcus Riley, who had considered himself invisible for 3 years, was now being observed in ways he could not comprehend. And Bumpy, who had survived countless threats and attempts on his life, was simply playing another game. The stakes were high, the risk monumental, but Bumpy moved with a calm assurance born of experience and mastery. Riley was about to learn, in the most dramatic way, that no technology, no promise of money, and no single act of betrayal could outmatch the power of a man who had eyes and ears everywhere. A man who understood that true control comes not from force, but from knowledge and the ability to anticipate every move before it is made. For the first 12 minutes, the conversation between Marcus Riley and Bumpy Johnson appeared ordinary, almost mundane. Riley, the FBI's chosen informant, had been trained to look for patterns, listen for details, and document every scrap of intelligence. He asked questions with careful precision, guiding the conversation toward the operations he believed would incriminate Bumpy. To he untrained eye, it seemed as though Riley held the upper hand, that the FBI had finally managed to place a man inside Harlem's criminal network, a man who could whisper the secrets of an empire into a hidden microphone. But Bumpy Johnson was no ordinary target, and Harlem was no ordinary backdrop. Every gesture he made, every word he spoke, carried layers of intent and strategy. From the moment Riley entered the office, Bumpy had begun the delicate art of orchestration, performing a dance in which he controlled the rhythm, the tempo, and the perception of power. Each answer he gave to Riley was calculated to appear forthright, yet it was meticulously curated to reveal only what he allowed. He named streets, times, and minor associates, the kind of details that would satisfy a casual obse, but ultimately left no path for law enforcement to follow. It was the illusion of transparency, a carefully painted picture designed to mislead. As Riley recorded, he grew increasingly confident, convinced that he had captured the heart of Bumpy's operations. He leaned forward slightly, prompting Bumpy with soft questions, nodding at key moments as the wire hummed faintly against his chest. ACH answers seemed to confirm the FBI's assumptions, the routes, the shipments, the schedules, all were meticulously documented. Riley imagined the commendations, the sense of accomplishment, and the payday that awaited him. He did not realize that he was being guided like a pawn in a chess game he could not understand. Bumpy's mind was always several steps ahead, anticipating each question, predicting every hesitation, and adjusting his responses to fit an unseen strategy. What Riley didn't notice was how controlled the environment had become. The office itself was part of Bumpy's intelligence network. Every visitor, every employee, even the arrangement of chairs and papers contributed to the way he managed perception. The subtle angle of the desk, the deliberate placement of objects, the timing of his gestures, all were signals to Riley that he was being observed more closely than he imagined. Bumpy had mastered the art of psychological control, of using environment and demeanor to manipulate the perceptions of those around him. Riley thought he was in charge of the conversation. In reality, he was following the path Bumpy had laid out for him. During those 12 minutes, Bumpy offered enough information to give the FBI the appearance of a successful operation, but nothing that would compromise him. Names were vague, locations were generalized, and timelines were deliberately structured to confuse any attempt at actionable intelligence. It was a delicate balance, a high-stakes performance that required poise, discipline, and deep understanding of human behavior. Bumpy's delivery was calm, measured, and unassuming, allowing Riley to feel as though he had stumbled into secrets, when in fact he was consuming precisely what Bumpy wanted him to see. The genius of Bumpy Johnson's approach lay not only in the information he provided, but also in the atmosphere he created. He exuded an air of confidence and authority that made betrayal seem impossible, even while it was you. He allowed Riley to believe he had discovered the inner workings of a criminal empire, giving him just enough to feel in control, to encourage him to continue recording, and to lower his own defenses. It was psychological warfare in its purest form, the art of guiding an opponent to act according to your plan without them ever realizing it. Every minute that passed, Riley's sense of accomplishment grew, but so did the subtle tension that he couldn't place. Bumpy's eyes, calm yet piercing, seemed to measure him, weigh him, and anticipate his every thought. The pauses in conversation were not accidental. They were deliberate spaces where Riley's mind filled in the gaps, making him believe he was discovering secrets, while Bumpy remained in total control. Every nod, every gesture, every carefully chosen word was part of a larger strategy to manipulate not just Riley, but the FBI itself. By the time 12 minutes had passed, Riley believed the operation was complete, that he had captured the evidence he needed. The wire had hummed with secrets. The details of Bumpy's empire had been exposed, or so he thought. But Bumpy Johnson, with his unparalleled understanding of human nature, had not revealed anything that would truly compromise him. The FBI had been given a perfect illusion, a trail of breadcrumbs that appeared valuable but ultimately led nowhere. It was a masterclass in deception, in the use of intellect and performance over force or intimidation. The real danger for Riley came in the next instant, when Bumpy leaned forward and whispered words that would shatter the illusion. Words that proved the depth of his insight and control. Those 12 minutes had been carefully orchestrated, not to expose Bumpy, but to teach a lesson about the limits of technology and the superiority of human intelligence. Riley's perception of control had been an elaborate trap, designed to demonstrate that no wire, no matter how sophisticated, could outmatch the foresight, cunning, and experience of a man like Bumpy Johnson. What happened during those 12 minutes was not a simple conversation. It was a performance, a psychological chess match in which Bumpy Johnson controlled every piece, every movement, and every outcome. The information Riley believed he had captured was nothing more than a reflection of Bumpy's genius, a carefully constructed illusion that masked the real truth. Bumpy Johnson always remained in control, even when he appeared to be speaking freely. And when the whisper finally came, the FBI's entire plan unraveled, proving that human intelligence, cunning, and intuition always surpass machines and hidden devices. Then it happened. In the middle of a conversation that had seemed, to Marcus Riley, carefully controlled and predictable, Bumpy Johnson leaned forward with a calmness that sent a shiver down Riley's spine. It was almost imperceptible at first, a subtle shift in posture, a slight narrowing of the eyes, but it carried a weight that Riley could not ignore. Bumpy had been speaking steadily, responding to questions, guiding the conversation with the precision of a master tactician. Every word he had shared for the past 12 minutes had appeared as though it were an inadvertent slip, a moment of candid truth. Yet Riley had no idea he was consuming exactly what Bumpy wanted him to hear. And then, those 5 words came, whispered like a dagger. "They're listening to us, Marcus." Time seemed to stop for Riley. His hand, which had been adjusting the wire under his jacket, froze mid-motion. The microphone he had trusted, the technology he believed would capture Bumpy's secrets, suddenly felt like a traitor against him. That simple 5-word phrase turned the entire room into a stage for terror and revelation. The words were not loud, they were soft, intimate, yet they carried a clarity and finality that left no room for doubt. Riley's blood ran cold. In that moment, he realized the terrifying truth. Bumpy Johnson had anticipated his betrayal, had known about the FBI's plan and had turned what seemed like an ordinary conversation into a carefully constructed trap. It wasn't just the whisper itself that shook Riley. It was the realization of what it represented. Bumpy Johnson had spent years building a network of observation, loyalty, and fear that extended far beyond the walls of his office. Every street, corner, every employee, every associate could be watching, listening, and reporting. Riley, despite his supposed invisibility, had walked straight into a web spun with meticulous care. The words "they're listening to us," Marcus, were not merely a warning. They were a revelation of the depth and sophistication of Bumpy's intelligence. In that instant, Riley understood that he had been a pawn in a game far larger and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The psychological impact on Riley was immediate. His confidence, once bolstered by the promise of money and recognition, crumbled. The excitement that had carried him into the office, the sense of power derived from being inside Bumpy's inner circle, was replaced by dread. He had believed he was the hunter, that he had control over the sea. Conversation, that the wire he carried would bring Bumpy down. Instead, he realized he had been entirely outmaneuvered. Bumpy Johnson had used every second of the previous 12 minutes to shape Riley's perception, to guide him into a false sense of security, and now he had delivered the final, devastating confirmation. Riley had been exposed from the start. Bumpy's words also revealed something else: his mastery of timing and subtlety. He did not confront Riley with anger or violence, which could have led to chaos or resistance. He whispered, softly, intimately, as though sharing a personal secret, but the meaning was lethal. In those 5 words, Bumpy conveyed knowledge, power, and dominance. He proved that intelligence, foresight, and understanding of human behavior were far more potent than any mechanical device. Riley's wire, the FBI's sophisticated technology, even their promises of money, all of it was meaningless in the face of Bumpy's comprehension of human nature and his ability to manipulate it. The moment was a turning point. Riley sat frozen, the weight of realization pressing on him. He had carried the wire with confidence, believing he was gathering incriminating evidence that would topple a kingpin. Now, he understood that the evidence he thought he had captured was carefully curated by Bumpy himself. Each route he had noted, each name he had recorded, had been presented on Bumpy's terms. There was no trap in the sense of immediate danger to Riley's life, yet the psychological trap was complete. He had recorded what Bumpy wanted, but it led to nothing, and the whisper made it clear that Riley had been thoroughly seen and understood the entire time. Bumpy Johnson's intelligence strategy during this encounter was nothing short of genius. He had allowed Riley to act on the FBI's plan, maintaining the illusion of transparency and candor, all while remaining several steps ahead. By feeding selective, non-compromising information, he created the illusion of cooperation. Then, with a single whispered sentence, he shattered the illusion, revealing his omniscience and control. It was a demonstration of the principle that knowledge and anticipation are more powerful than brute force, more effective than technology, and more enduring than fear alone. For Riley, the emotional impact was overwhelming. Fear, guilt, and helplessness combined into a cruci. And wait, he realized that his actions, motivated by greed and the desire for recognition, had played directly into the hands of a man whose understanding of human behavior was unmatched. The wire, the plan, the FBI scheme, all were meaningless in the face of Bumpy's psychological acumen. Riley had been entirely outsmarted, and the implications extended far beyond the office. Bumpy Johnson had down in a single whisper that the control of information and perception was absolute, that betrayal could be anticipated, and that the power of human insight could outmatch any machine or device. In that tense, almost cinematic moment, Bumpy had done more than protect himself. He had delivered a masterclass in intelligence warfare. He had turned an attempt at entrapment into a demonstration of superiority, teaching not only Riley but anyone who might hear of the incident a lesson about trust, control, and observation. The phrase "they're listening to us," Marcus, would echo through time as an example of how the sharpest minds can use subtlety, patience, and human insight to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. It was a reminder that in the world of intelligence, anticipation, and understanding trump equipment and brute force every time. By the time the words had left Bumpy's lips, Riley knew that the operation was over. The FBI's plan had failed. The DUI. Ree had captured nothing of true consequence, and the informant's position was irreparably compromised. Bumpy Johnson had emerged not only unscathed, but triumphant, proving yet again that the human mind, when sharpened by experience, observation, and cunning, is the most formidable weapon of all. The 5 words whispered that day did more than reveal knowledge. They transformed the dynamic of trust, betrayal, and intelligence in Harlem forever. The aftermath of Bumpy Johnson's whisper was devastating for Marcus Riley and the FBI, though at the time it may have seemed almost invisible to the outside world. Riley had walked into the office with a sense of purpose, believing he carried the tools of modern law enforcement: the wire, the recording equipment, and the promise of a substantial payoff. He imagined himself acting as the invisible agent, gathering the intelligence that would bring Harlem's most feared kingpin to justice. But within moments of Bumpy's subtle intervention, Riley's confidence and illusion of control evaporated. The entire operation, planned with meticulous attention to detail, collapsed quietly but completely, leaving only questions, confusion, and fear in its wake. Riley sat frozen, the weight of Bumpy's 5 words pressing on him. He realized that everything he had been trained to do, the questions, the prompts, the careful placement of the wire, had been rendered irrelevant by Bumpy's foresight. The information he thought he had captured was carefully curated by Bumpy, designed to give the FBI the appearance of a successful operation while concealing every detail that mattered. Names were generalized, schedules were manipulated, and routes were only partially accurate, creating a trail that led nowhere actionable. Riley understood that in trying to manipulate Bumpy, he had walked straight into Bumpy's strategy, a strategy that demonstrated how intelligence, cunning, and observation could outmatch any technology or plan. The collapse of the FBI opera. Cheon was more than a simple failure. It was a revelation about the limits of technology and the vulnerability of human agents. For decades, law enforcement had relied increasingly on devices, gadgets, and mechanical surveillance, believing that these tools could replace human judgment and intuition. The wire Riley carried, state-of-the-art for its time, was supposed to give the FBI a decisive edge. Instead, it became a symbol of their weakness. Bumpy Johnson had proven that no matter how sophisticated a device or how clever an operation, a single human mind, honed by experience, could neutralize it entirely. Riley had believed he was in control, but Bumpy had demonstrated that control lay not in the wire, the money, or the plan, but in the understanding of people and the anticipation of behavior. The psychological impact on Riley was profound. He had entered Bumpy's office thinking he was the hunter, the one gathering secrets, the man holding power. Instead, he realized he was completely exposed, his every move observed and predicted. The confidence and greed that had propelled him into this operation were replaced with fear and guilt. He was no longer an agent in control, he was a peon, a witness to a display of genius he could neither understand nor counter. Riley's situation mirrored a broader truth about Harlem and Bumpy Johnson's world. Technology and authority were only as effective as the human networks that understood and manipulated them. No wiretap, no matter how advanced, could match the intelligence cultivated through observation, trust, and subtle influence. Pie's handling of the situation was a masterclass in strategic patience. He allowed Riley to operate under the illusion that he was in charge, letting him speak, guide the conversation, and record what he thought were critical details. Each word Riley spoke was carefully curated by Bumpy, creating a narrative that appeared to incriminate but ultimately led nowhere. By the time the whisper came, the deception was complete. Bumpy had used the human tendency to trust appearances against Riley, exploiting the FBI's over-reliance on technology and their assumption that a man in the inner circle could be completely controlled. The operation's collapse was total yet subtle, leaving no immediate chaos or violence, only the quiet, inescapable lesson that Bumpy Johnson had already won. For the FBI, the consequences were both practical and reputational. They had invested resources, manpower, and intelligence into an operation that yielded nothing of true value. The wiretap, intended to be an unassailable tool, had been neutralized by human cunning. Agents who had expected a breakthrough instead faced the humbling realization that their methods could be outmaneuvered by someone who understood the intricacies of human behavior, loyalty, and deception. The failure was not merely tactical, it was a demonstration that power could not be measured by technology alone, and that intelligence operations required an understanding of human networks that often exceeded the capabilities of the most sophisticated equipment. Harlem, in the 1940s, was a complex tapestry of observation, loyalty, and information flow, and Bumpy Johnson had mastered it. His eyes were everywhere, his ears in every corner, and his influence extended to the streets, the businesses, and even the law enforcement networks that thought they were gathering intelligence on him. The collapse of the FBI's operation revealed the superiority of human networks over mechanical surveillance. Trust, fear, and observation could out. Match wires, microphones, and hidden devices every time. Bumpy had not only survived betrayal, he had demonstrated a principle that would define his control over Harlem for years to come. Knowledge, understanding, and anticipation were the ultimate weapons. Riley left Bumpy's office forever changed. The wire he had carried, the recordings he had made, and the promises of payment became meaningless. He had learned, too late, that Bumpy Johnson's understanding of human nature and information warfare far exceeded anything he had been trained to do. The FBI had been outmaneuvered by a man who understood that intelligence is as much about psychology and perception as it is about devices and data. Bumpy's victory was quiet yet complete. No shots were fired, no alarm sounded, but the message why's clear. Technology alone could never replace experience, insight, and mastery of human behavior. In the end, the operation's failure reinforced one of Bumpy Johnson's most enduring lessons. In a world where betrayal, surveillance, and manipulation are constant threats, it is the human mind, not machines, that holds ultimate power. The collapse of the FBI's plan, the destruction of Riley's confidence, and the demonstration of Bumpy's strategic brilliance were not just events of that day. They were a blueprint for understanding the superiority of human intelligence networks over any mechanical or technological attempt to control them. Bumpy had turned a potential threat into a statement, a teaching moment, and a reminder that the streets of Harlem belonged to those who could see, understand, and anticipate everything, all while appearing calm, composed, and in complete control. The story of Marcus Riley and the FBI wire is more than an anecdote of betrayal and cunning. It is a vivid illustration of the genius of Bumpy Johnson and the enduring power of human intelligence. By the time Riley left Bumpy's office, he had learned a lesson that could never be taught in a classroom or captured in a manual. True control lies not in gadgets, wires, or technology, but in understanding human behavior, trust, perception, and anticipation. Bumpy had turned what could have been a simple betrayal into a masterclass in psychological warfare, demonstrating that the human mind is the ultimate instrument of power. Bumpy Johnson's ability to manipulate situations was rooted in his deep understanding of people. He knew how individuals acted under pressure, how greed, fear, and ambition influence CED decisions, and how small details could reveal intentions. In the encounter with Riley, he exploited every one of these traits. Marcus entered the office confident, motivated by the promise of money, and assured by the FBI that he was the key to dismantling Harlem's drug networks. He believed that his secret wire gave him the upper hand, that he could gather evidence undetected. But Bumpy understood the psychology behind Riley's confidence. He knew that a man driven by greed and the desire for recognition is often blind to the traps set around him. By allowing Riley to believe he was in control, Bumpy guided the conversation precisely where he wanted it to go, creating the illusion of exposure while safeguarding the real operations. This encounter also illustrated the subtle art of anticipation. Bumpy had already prepared for betrayal before it even occurred. His network of informants, his keen observation, and his street-level intelligence allowed him to predict Riley's actions and the FBI's strategy. He knew what Riley would ask, how he would act, and what he would consider important. The entire interaction was choreographed with the precision of a seasoned tactician. When Bumpy whispered, "They're listening to us, Marcus," it was not a reaction, but the culmination of a carefully laid plan. Those 5 words crystallized the power dynamic and left no doubt in Riley's mind who truly controlled the situation. Bumpy's mastery extended beyond the immediate situation. It was a demonstration of a broader principle that defined his influence over Harlem and the criminal underworld. He understood that technology, no matter how advanced, is only effective when paired with human insight. The FBI's Wire, a state-of-the-art tool for surveillance, was rendered irrelevant because it lacked the ability to interpret nuance, understand context, and anticipate deception. In contrast, Bumpy's intelligence network, built on observation, loyalty, and fear, was flexible, adaptive, and virtually impossible to circumvent. He had transformed the limitations of human perception into his greatest strength, using them to manipulate outcomes without ever firing a shot. This story also highlights the profound psychological impact of Bumpy's tactics. Riley, who had once seen himself as invisible, was forced to confront the reality that he had been fully exposed from the moment he entered the office. His confidence, built on the assumed superiority of technology, crumbled under the weight of Bumpy's insight. Fear, guilt, and helplessness replaced anticipation and ambition, leaving him both shocked and humbled. For Bumpy, the effect on Riley was a tool in itself, a demonstration of the consequences of underestimating the power of human intelligence. It was not just about neutralizing a threat. It was about sending a clear message that betrayal carries consequences far beyond the obvious, and that in the world Bumpy ruled, perception is as important as action. The legacy of this encounter reaches far beyond Riley and the FBI. It serves as a testament to Bumpy Johnson's enduring influence and the principles that governed his life and empire. In an era when many believed that violence, intimidation, or technology alone could secure control, Bumpy demonstrated that foresight, understanding, and psychological mastery are the true foundations of power. The encounter is a blueprint for intelligence, showing that the human mind, when trained and disciplined, can outmaneuver even the most sophisticated attempts at surveillance or manipulation. It is a lesson not only for law enforcement and criminals, but for anyone who seeks to understand the dynamics of trust, loyalty, and deception. Bumpy Johnson's brilliance lay in his ability to turn potential threats into opportunities. What could have been a catastrophic betrayal became a showcase of his skill. He allowed the FBI to think they had the upper hand, let Riley act on his assumptions, and then, at the precise moment, revealed the reality of the situation with a whisper. That whisper, so simple yet so devastating, transformed the power dynamic entirely. It was a quiet, elegant, and terrifying demonstration of how knowledge and anticipation can outmatch force and technology. The encounter with Marcus Riley also reinforced a fundamental truth about Bumpy Johnson's world. In Harlem, influence was built on networks, observation, and the subtle manipulation of human behavior. Those who underestimated these principles, whether FBI agents, rival gangsters, or even trusted allies, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Bumpy's intelligence network, the web of loyalty, ear and observation he maintained, was far more effective than any mechanical device or formal authority. His genius was not in the weapons he carried or the intimidation he projected, but in the unseen strategies, the anticipation, and the ability to predict human behavior with uncanny accuracy. By the end of the day, Bumpy Johnson had not only survived a potential betrayal, but had demonstrated an enduring lesson about the nature of power. Technology can record words, but it cannot record insight. Wires can capture conversations, but they cannot capture understanding. And no matter how advanced an operation, it is the human mind, trained, disciplined, and attuned to the rhythms of human behavior, that will always prevail. The encounter between Bumpy and Marcus Riley remains one of the most powerful illustrations of this principle. 5 whispered words, delivered at the perfect moment, neutralized an entire operation and cemented Bumpy Johnson's reputation as a master of intelligence, perception, and control. Bumpy Johnson's legacy, as demonstrated in this story, is not merely one of survival or street power. It is the legacy of a man who understood that information is power, that observation is more reliable than technology, and that the human mind, when applied strategically, can outmaneuver any adversary. His story teaches that true mastery lies in patience, anticipation, and the subtle orchestration of human behavior, a lesson that resonates long after the events of that day, echoing through Harlem and beyond as a testament to the enduring supremacy of human intelligence.